Welcome to Socratic Spark, where timeless wisdom fuels unstoppable motivation. Hey, we go beyond cliches and empty slogans. Inspired by the fearless life of Socrates, this channel is about questioning limits, conquering fear, and finding strength through truth. Over 2,400 years ago, Socrates stood against power, ignorance, and even death, with nothing but the courage to question. Today, his spirit still speaks. The unexamined life is not worth living. Join us as we transform ancient philosophy into modern power. Think deeper, live braver, rise stronger. Subscribe and let wisdom ignite your spark. Human beings are liars. We lie to ourselves, to others, and to the world. We pretend we know what is good, what is just, what is wise. But in truth, we are ignorant. 2.5 millennia ago, one man dared to expose this illusion. His name was Socrates. He was not a king, nor a soldier, nor a writer. He left no book, no empire, no monument. Yet he unsettled his city more than any enemy ever could. Why? Because he revealed that most of us live asleep, chained to false beliefs, corrupted by shallow desires, unwilling to question. And when a man like Socrates forces society to wake up, society resists. It condemns him, silences him, and kills him. But what it cannot kill is the fire he lit, the fire of relentless questioning, the courage to face death rather than betray truth. This is Socrates' secret, that real strength is not in power or survival, but in refusing to give up on the pursuit of wisdom. No matter the cost, Socrates was not a conqueror, nor a poet, nor a man of wealth. He left no temple, no empire, no book with his name on it. And yet, more than 2,000 years later, his voice still unsettles us. Why? Because he dared to ask the questions we avoid. What is justice? What is courage? What is a good life? Questions that stripped away illusions and exposed the uncomfortable truth, that most of us live asleep, clinging to borrowed beliefs and false wisdom. He called himself ignorant, and in that humility revealed the path to wisdom. For Socrates, strength was not measured in power or possessions, but in the courage to live authentically, to never surrender to lies, to never betray truth, to never give up on the examined life. And when Athens placed him on trial, he did not beg for mercy. He chose death with serenity, proving that real strength lies not in survival but in fidelity to truth. That is Socrates' secret, that a life of questioning, though costly, is the only life worth living. And in his example, he challenges us even now. Will we dare to live awake? Every great change in human history began not with answers, but with questions. Questions that cut through the noise of tradition, authority, and fear. And no one embodied this more than Socrates. He was not born into privilege. He did not write books or command armies. What he possessed was far more dangerous, the courage to question. Imagine the streets of Athens, crowded marketplaces filled with merchants bargaining, politicians giving speeches, poets reciting verses. Among them wanders an old man, barefoot, unshaven, plain in appearance. He does not sell goods. He does not seek applause. Instead, he asks simple, unsettling questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is beauty? And suddenly, the confident voices of the so-called wise falter. Their definitions collapse under the weight of logic. Their certainty dissolves, leaving behind silence, unease, and often anger. This was Socrates' method, not to preach, but to probe. He believed that truth cannot be handed down like an object. It must be discovered through relentless questioning. And that process requires courage. Why? Because questioning challenges not only others, but ourselves. It strips away illusions, exposes our ignorance, and forces us to confront what we would rather ignore. Most people flee from such discomfort. Socrates walked straight into it. To question in private is difficult enough. But Socrates questioned in public, confronting politicians who claimed to know justice, poets who claimed divine inspiration, and generals who claimed to understand courage. He stood alone against the pride of a city, and when threatened with death, he did not abandon this path. For him, questioning was not a technique. It was a way of life, a sacred duty to truth. The courage to question is still rare today. We live in a world filled with noise, opinions shouted across screens, slogans disguised as wisdom, leaders who promise certainty but fear scrutiny. To question in such a world is to risk being ridiculed, rejected, or silenced. Yet Socrates teaches us that without questioning, there is no growth, no freedom, no genuine wisdom. Consider how easy it is to conform, to accept what society tells us is success, to repeat what others say is truth, to live without examining the foundations of our beliefs. This is a comfortable path. But Socrates calls it a life half-lived, a life of shadows. Real courage, he reminds us, is not charging into battle with a sword. It is standing alone with a question that unsettles a crowd. His own city could not endure this courage. They accuse him of corrupting the youth, but in truth, he was awakening them. They claimed he dishonored the gods, but in truth, he honored the deepest calling of the soul, to seek what is true. Athens silenced him with poison, but they could not silence the questions he left behind. For those questions remain alive. What is justice? What is virtue? What is a good life? These are not relics of the past. They are the questions we must still face if we want to live fully awake. And to face them requires courage, the same courage Socrates carried to his final breath. So let us remember, the courage to question is not just a philosophical exercise. It is an act of resistance against falsehood, an act of fidelity to truth, and the first step toward freedom. To honor Socrates is to dare to question, even when the world demands silence. Most people fear ignorance. We hide it, deny it, cover it up with borrowed opinions and second-hand knowledge. We pretend to know, because to admit otherwise feels like weakness. Yet Socrates did something radical. He declared before the world, "I know that I know nothing." At first glance, this sounds like defeat, like an admission of failure. But in truth, it was a foundation of his wisdom. For Socrates understood that the greatest obstacle to learning is not ignorance itself, but the illusion of knowledge. To believe we already know is to close the door to discovery. To admit we do not know is to step into freedom. Picture Socrates in conversation with a self-proclaimed wise man of Athens, a politician boasting of his understanding of justice, a poet claiming divine inspiration for his verses, a craftsman proud of his technical skills. Socrates listened patiently, then asked his quiet, piercing questions, and in moments their confidence unraveled. What they thought they knew dissolved into contradiction. They left humiliated, while Socrates, who claimed no special knowledge, walked away wiser. This is a paradox of wisdom, that humility is its beginning. Only the mind that accepts its emptiness can be filled with truth. Only the heart that admits its blindness can learn to see. In acknowledging ignorance, Socrates was not weak. He was free. Free from the chains of arrogance. Free from the prison of false certainty today. We live in an age drowning in information. Facts at our fingertips. Opinions everywhere. Voices shouting across screens. And yet, true wisdom feels rarer than ever. Why? Because we confuse information with understanding, noise with knowledge, certainty with truth. The Socratic lesson cuts through this illusion. Admit what you do not know, and you begin to learn. Pretend to know, and you remain forever ignorant. Ignorance, in Socrates' vision, is not an ending but a beginning. It is like standing in darkness and realizing it. Only then can you seek the light. Those who believe they already see have no reason to look deeper. Those who confess their blindness open their eyes to illumination. This humility also gave Socrates an inner strength. While others clung to status and reputation, terrified of being exposed, Socrates embraced exposure. He welcomed the collapse of false knowledge because it brought him closer to truth. His strength was not in pretending, but in persevering, in never giving up the pursuit of clarity, even when that pursuit left him with more questions than answers. And so, his legacy challenges us. Are we willing to admit our ignorance? Are we brave enough to let go of the comfort of ready-made answers and step into the uncertainty of questioning? To do so takes courage, for society rewards confidence, not humility. Yet only through this path can we hope to approach wisdom. Socrates reminds us, the beginning of wisdom is not power, not wealth, not prestige. It is a simple, difficult, liberating act of saying, I do not know. From this soil of humility grows the courage to learn, the patience to seek, and the strength to never give up on truth. So let us not fear ignorance. Let us fear only the arrogance that blinds us to our own limits. For it is in recognizing our ignorance that we find the doorway to wisdom, to virtue, and to the examined life. Imagine a crowded Athenian court. The year is 399 BCE. Hundreds of citizens packed the stone chamber, their voices rising like a storm. At the center stands an old man, barefoot, calm, unshaken. His name is Socrates, and today Athens has put truth itself on trial. The charges are grave, corrupting the youth, rejecting the city's gods, undermining the moral order. But behind these accusations lies something deeper, fear. For Socrates had exposed the ignorance of politicians, the pretensions of poets, the arrogance of generals. He made the powerful look foolish. He unsettled the comfortable lives of his city, and for this they demanded his silence. Most men, faced with death, would plead for mercy. They would bargain, flatter, or run. But not Socrates. When given the chance to escape into exile, he refused. "Wherever I go," he said, "the questions will follow, for a life without truth is not worth living." To betray philosophy for safety was, to him, worse than death itself. The trial became a stage, not for Socrates' defense, but for Athens' soul. Here was a man unarmed, facing the entire weight of his city, yet speaking with unbreakable courage. He told the jurors plainly, "You think death is the greatest evil, but I tell you, to betray truth, to live unexamined, is far worse." And so the verdict came. Guilty, by the vote of his fellow citizens, the greatest questioner of Athens was condemned. His punishment, to drink the cup of poison hemlock. But even then, Socrates did not tremble. As his friends wept, he comforted them. As they begged him to flee, he stood firm. "No evil can happen to a good man," he said. For him, death was not defeat. The true defeat was cowardice, surrendering the pursuit of wisdom for the illusion of safety. In that final moment, the city believed it had silenced him. Yet, in truth, Athens had lit a fire that would never die. Socrates' trial was not the end of philosophy, but its beginning. His courage revealed a lesson greater than any book, any empire, any monument, that truth is worth more than life itself. Today, we live in a world where truth is still on trial. Voices are silenced, inconvenient questions are buried, and comfort is chosen over honesty. But Socrates reminds us, the trial of truth is never truly over. It is a trial each generation must face. And the verdict depends not on courts, but on us. The hemlock may have taken his body, but it could not touch his spirit. The trial of Socrates became the triumph of philosophy, for while Athens condemned him to die, history immortalized him as a man who proved that truth, once spoken with courage, can never be killed. There is a silence that follows Socrates' trial, heavier than any verdict. He has drunk the poison. He has left behind no book, no scripture, no temple. Yet in the hearts of those who heard him, one sentence remains like an unshakable echo. The unexamined life is not worth living. At first, these words sound harsh. Not worth living? What does that mean? Isn't life, in itself, precious? Isn't survival enough? To Socrates, the answer was no. Survival without reflection was no life at all. A man who never questions why he believes, why he acts, why he lives as he does, is not living, but merely existing, like a shadow moving through time. He saw Athens filled with such shadows, men chasing wealth without purpose, soldiers fighting for honor they could not define, politicians speaking of justice yet blind to its meaning. To live unexamined was to be enslaved, not by chains of iron, but by chains of ignorance. Socrates offered no escape from suffering, no promise of wealth, no easy comfort. Instead, he offered something far greater, the freedom of the mind. To examine life meant to question, to strip away illusions, to stand naked before truth. It meant asking, what is justice? What is love? What is courage? Who am I, really? For Socrates, this questioning was not a luxury. It was the very essence of being human. A life unexamined was a life half-lived, a wasted gift. As the gadfly to the horse, he said, so am I to the city. His endless questions were meant to sting Athens awake, to rouse it from the sleep of ignorance. And though many hated him for it, he was right. A society that does not examine itself breeds corruption. An individual who does not examine his choices becomes a slave to habit. A soul that never reflects cannot grow. But what does this mean for us today? We live in a world louder than Athens ever was, a world of endless distractions, where questions are drowned out by noise and reflection is smothered by comfort. We scroll, we consume, we obey, but rarely do we pause to ask, why am I here? What is my purpose? Am I truly living, or just existing? To follow Socrates is to dare to ask these questions. It is to stand apart from the crowd and refuse to be carried by the current of conformity. It is to accept that truth may wound before it heals, that wisdom begins with the admission of ignorance, and that courage is needed not only to face death, but to face oneself. The examined life is not an easy life. It demands honesty, discipline, and humility. It asks us to confront uncomfortable truths, to admit when we are wrong, to let go of false pride. But it also gives us the only life worth living, a life of clarity, authenticity, and freedom. When Socrates declared that the unexamined life is not worth living, he was not condemning others. He was challenging us. He was handing us a torch, saying, "Take this flame. Use it to light your own darkness. Do not waste your brief time on earth living blindly. Seek, question, reflect. Only then will you be truly alive." And so, his words remain not as a judgment, but as an invitation to live consciously, courageously, and what keeps a ship steady in the storm. Not the size of its sails, not the strength of its crew, but its compass, the guide that points true no matter how violent the sea. For Socrates, life was no different. The storms of desire, fear, ambition, and corruption tossed every human being. And the only compass that could guide the soul through these storms was virtue. But what is virtue? To the Athenians, virtue often meant reputation, success, or honor. To generals, it meant victory in battle. To politicians, it meant power. To merchants, it meant wealth. But Socrates saw all these as illusions. True virtue, he believed, was not about what the world gives you, but about the condition of your soul. Virtue does not come from wealth, he told the jury at his trial, but from virtue comes wealth and every other good thing. He turned the entire value system of Athens upside down. Where others sought riches and honors, Socrates sought integrity. Where others feared poverty and death, Socrates feared only one thing, the corruption of the soul. To him, virtue was not a decoration of life. It was life itself. Courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom were not abstract ideals, but living forces that shaped a person's very being. A man who lived without virtue, no matter how powerful or successful, was lost. A man of virtue, even in chains, even facing death, was free. Imagine Socrates in his final hours, the cup of hemlock in his hand. Around him, his friends wept in despair, yet he remained calm, almost serene. Why? Because his compass was steady. He had lived with truth, he had sought wisdom, he had refused corruption. And so, even as his body was condemned, his soul was untouched. That was the power of virtue. In this, Socrates challenged not only Athens, but every one of us. He asked, what is guiding your life? Is it wealth, fame, comfort, or fear? Or is it virtue, the compass that points to what is right, no matter the cost? Today, our storms are not so different. We are pulled by greed, shaken by fear, and blinded by the endless chase for status. We measure ourselves by what we own, how we look, how many admire us. But Socrates reminds us, all of this is fragile. Wealth can vanish, beauty can fade, power can collapse. The only thing that endures, the only compass that never lies, is virtue. To live by virtue is not to live a life free of struggle. It is to live with direction, with clarity, with courage. Virtue makes a man unshakable when others tremble, honest when others deceive, strong when others surrender. It is not an external armor, but an inner fire. Socrates believed that each soul already carries the seed of virtue. The task is not to invent it, but to awaken it through questioning, reflection, and courage. When you act justly even when no one is watching, when you tell the truth even when it costs you, when you resist temptation because your soul demands better, in those moments you are living as Socrates lived. For him, the greatest tragedy was not death, but a soul that had lost its compass. The greatest achievement was not survival, but a soul that remained true. And so, his message resounds even now. Let virtue be your guide. Do not let the storms of life carry you blindly. Do not measure yourself by what the world applauds, but by whether your soul is aligned with truth. For in the end, when wealth fades, when power falls, when time takes everything away, only virtue remains. Virtue is the compass of the soul. Follow it, and no storm will ever make you truly lost. Picture an old man in the marketplace of Athens. He owns nothing. He carries no scrolls, no instruments of power. All he has are questions. And yet, those questions were sharper than swords, stronger than walls, more enduring than monuments. This was Socrates' true weapon, the dialogue. He never lectured, never imposed. Instead, he asked, "What is justice? What is courage? What is love?" To some, these seemed simple. But as they answered, Socrates would peel apart their words, strip away false confidence, and expose ignorance hidden beneath. It was not cruelty, it was care. Like a midwife helps bring forth new life, Socrates saw himself as helping souls give birth to truth. The city hated him for this, but his disciples loved him for it. Plato, standing in those circles of conversation, absorbed every question, every challenge, every pause. And through Plato's dialogues, Socrates' voice did not die. From Plato to Aristotle, from Aristotle to Aquinas, Augustine, Descartes, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, all the way to our modern thinkers, the chain of dialogue has never been broken. This is Socrates' greatest legacy, not an answer, but a method, not a doctrine, but a way of living. The Socratic dialogue taught that truth is not handed down fully formed. It is uncovered, piece by piece, through questioning, reflection, and humility. And this legacy does not belong only to philosophers. It belongs to every one of us. Each time you dare to ask, "Why do I believe this? Is this just? Am I truly living as I should?" You are entering into a Socratic dialogue with yourself. Look around our modern world. Technology connects us, yet loneliness grows. Opinions spread like wildfire, yet wisdom is scarce. People speak loudly, but listen rarely. What would Socrates do here? He would not shout. He would not preach. He would ask, patiently, persistently, piercingly, until the noise gave way to truth. The legacy of Socratic dialogue is also a legacy of courage, for questioning is never safe. To question power invites hostility. To question tradition invites suspicion. To question oneself invites pain. But as Socrates showed, this is the only path to freedom. For a society that silences questions breeds tyranny, and a soul that avoids questions breeds ignorance. And so his dialogues live on, not only in books but in every classroom, every courtroom, every conversation where someone dares to ask why. Every teacher who guides rather than dictates, every friend who challenges rather than flatters, every thinker who values truth above comfort, all are living echoes of Socrates. Perhaps that is why, even in death, Socrates never truly left Athens. He remained wherever there is a question asked with sincerity, wherever there is a soul brave enough to doubt, wherever there is a voice that says, "I do not know, but I wish to learn." This is the immortality he achieved, not through temples of marble, but through dialogues of the mind. For marble crumbles, empires fall, but questions endure. And as long as humanity keeps asking, Socrates will never die. So the question comes to us, what will we do with this legacy? Will we silence it with distraction, with fear, with conformity? Or will we honor it by daring to dialogue with others, with the world, and with ourselves? The choice is ours. But if we choose as Socrates chose, if we dare to question with honesty and courage, then his voice will not only live in history books, it will live in us. The gadfly of Athens still stings. The dialogue continues. And through it, truth survives. The night is quiet in Athens. In a dimly lit prison cell, Socrates sits surrounded by his students. Some weep, others beg him to flee. The city has condemned him, and the cup of poison hemlock waits on the table. Most men, faced with such a fate, would tremble, plead, or cling desperately to life. But not Socrates. Instead, he speaks softly, as though nothing extraordinary is about to happen. He discusses the immortality of the soul, the duty of philosophy, the meaning of virtue. To him, death is not an enemy to be feared, but a passage to be understood. No evil can happen to a good man, he tells his companions. In those words lies his greatest courage, the belief that the soul, guided by truth and virtue, cannot be harmed by death. Socrates' courage was not the courage of the warrior who rushes into battle, nor the courage of the politician who seeks glory. It was deeper, the courage to face the unknown with calm, to accept mortality without surrendering integrity. Where others saw death as the greatest evil, Socrates saw falsehood and cowardice as far worse. As he lifted the cup to his lips, Athens believed it had silenced its gadfly, but in reality it gave birth to an immortal lesson, that the measure of a man is not how long he lives, but how truthfully he lives. To live without courage, to abandon one's principles for the sake of survival, is to die while still breathing. To live with courage, even in death, is to achieve immortality. This moment in the prison cell has echoed for centuries. It teaches us that courage is not merely an act of boldness in battlefields or parliaments. It is a quiet strength to remain true when all the world demands your silence. It is a refusal to compromise your soul, even when the cost is everything. And so, the courage of Socrates challenges us still. For we, too, must face our trials. Not the hemlock, perhaps, but the daily choices where truth demands sacrifice. Will we speak when it is easier to be silent? Will we act with integrity when corruption is safer? Will we hold fast to wisdom when ignorance is more convenient? To live as Socrates lived is to see death not as the enemy, but as a final test of our courage. And to pass that test is not to survive, but to remain faithful to the truth, even in the last breath. His death was not a defeat, it was a victory. For Athens took his body, but could not touch his soul. In the stillness of that prison, as he drank the hemlock, Socrates proved his greatest teaching, that the pursuit of wisdom, guided by courage, is a power greater than death itself. 2,500 years have passed since Socrates walked the streets of Athens. The stones of the agora have crumbled. The voices of the jury have long been silenced. The empire that condemned him has faded into dust. Yet his words remain. His questions remain. His wisdom, like a flame, still burns. How does a man with no writings, no army, no riches, outlive kings and conquerors? Because wisdom, unlike power or wealth, is beyond time. Marble statues break. Golden empires fall. But a question that pierces the soul never dies. Socrates knew this. He never sought immortality through monuments or legacy. He sought only truth, and in seeking truth, he touched something eternal. When he asked, "What is justice? What is virtue? What is the good life?" he was not asking for Athens alone. He was asking for all humanity, for every generation yet unborn. And so, when we hear his words today, they do not sound like relics of a vanished age. They sound like they were spoken yesterday, or even now, in the quiet corners of our own minds. For who among us has not struggled with doubt? Who has not wondered whether we are living rightly or merely drifting? Who has not felt the hunger for something greater than comfort, the hunger for meaning? This is a miracle of Socratic wisdom. It is not locked in history, but alive in the present. It whispers to the student who dares to question their teachers. It challenges the leader tempted by corruption. It comforts the seeker searching for truth in a world of lies. Even science, politics, and education still carry his torch. Every time a scientist questions an assumption, every time a citizen challenges injustice, every time a teacher inspires students to think rather than obey, Socrates is alive again. He lives not in temples of stone, but in the living dialogue of human minds. The wisdom of Socrates is beyond time because it speaks to what never changes, the human soul. Our cities look different, our tools have advanced, our empires rise and fall, but our struggles remain the same. We still wrestle with justice, with courage, with ignorance, with fear. And so, his wisdom still guides us, like a lighthouse cutting through the fog of centuries. And perhaps this is Socrates' final secret. To never give up is not only to endure hardship in one lifetime, but to plant seeds of wisdom that outlive death itself. He did not conquer Athens. He conquered time. The story of Socrates does not end with a cup of hemlock. It does not end in the silence of a courtroom or the grief of his disciples. It does not end because truth does not end. What Athens killed was a body, but what it awakened was a spirit that no city, no court, no death could extinguish. Think of that final scene. The philosopher in chains, calm as ever, consoling his friends instead of himself. Around him, Grown men wept, yet Socrates remained steady. His words carried no bitterness, no fear, only clarity. He reminded them that death is not the enemy, fuss it is. To abandon truth is worse than to abandon life. And with those final breaths, he gave the world a lesson that outlived empires, that the examined life is not only worth living, it is the only life truly lived. What does this mean for us today, in a world of noise, distraction, and shallow victories? It means we must dare to question when silence is easier. We must seek wisdom when ignorance feels safer. We must hold to virtue when corruption promises reward. And above all, we must find the courage to live authentically, even if it means standing alone. Socrates teaches us that resilience is not the stubbornness of survival, but the refusal to betray our soul. His secret to never giving up was simple and yet profound, the love of truth greater than the fear of death. 2,000 years have passed, yet every time a human being asks a difficult question, refuses to conform, or chooses integrity over comfort, Socrates lives again. He is not buried in Athens. He walks with us, challenges us, provokes us. He whispers into the hearts of those who dare to think, do not live asleep. Do not live unexamined. Do not give up on truth. And so, the final frame of his life becomes a beginning for ours. To honor Socrates is not to memorize his words, but to live them, courageously, truthfully, endlessly questioning. For in that pursuit, we find not just his secret, but the secret of being fully human.